Well, that's an appropriate tune there. Huey Lewis in the news, because we welcome now to the Element Well studio multimedia journalist with SuperTalk Mississippi News, Caleb Sailors.
Yeah, I don't bring the news as well as Huey Lewis and company did, but I'll do my best today.
All right, Caleb. I don't think we saw any major surprises. I mean, surprises typically in politics would be like upsets, right? You know, situations where someone took on an incumbent and was able to defeat them. The one that comes to mind I'll ask you about is Public Service Commissioner in the South, in the Southern District.
So incumbent Dane Maxwell was unseated by Nelson Wayne Carr. And I honestly didn't expect to see that one happening. Of course, I didn't have a lot of information coming from the southern portion of the state about that race. But I just, you think the incumbent in those situations are typically going to win. But I had a couple of sources tell me that Maxwell was seen kind of as the pro-utility companies guy, and that I saw a comment on one of the forums about him that he never saw a rate increase that he didn't like. And some people in the Southern District were upset with that and didn't like that. And I heard that Nelson Carr had a pretty good campaign in Hattiesburg and in portions of like Gulfport and Biloxi too, and got voters out. And I kept seeing the numbers come in last night, and I was like, okay, well, it's early on. The incumbent will probably take over here. And then, no, he just kept separating himself further and further from Maxwell, and then it eventually got called for him. And so we'll have a new public service commissioner on the Southern District. And on the Northern District, too, Chris Brown, longtime state representative, defeated Tanner Newman. So he'll occupy Brandon Presley's seat, as Presley's running for governor. So now we've got two new faces in the Public Service Commission. And it's interesting now looking at November, because Chris Brown and Nelson Carr don't face any opponents on the Democrat side. They're unopposed in November, but you have DeKeither Stamps versus Brent Bailey in the Central District, and if Stamps wins, you'll have all three new public service commissioners in Mississippi. But if Bailey wins, the incumbent, you'll have all three Republican members of the Public Service Commission. So kind of the way I was thinking about that last night. But we had a couple of unexpected turns of events, too. In House District 2, Nick Bain, longtime representative, was forced to a runoff with Brad Maddox. And in House District 10, Brady Williamson, the incumbent, was defeated by Josh Hawkins, not to be confused with Josh Harkins, who was on with you yesterday. And then House District 23, Perry Van Bailey, who was sworn in on February 15th in a special election, only won by 7 votes. Well, he's forced to a runoff. And House District 72, one with local interest, Rakia Lumumba, the sister of Jackson Mayor Chokwe Antar Lumumba, was forced to a runoff with Justice Gibbs. And then one that was kind of surprising for people on the coast or people in the South was Senate District 46. Philip Moran was unseated by Philman Ladner. Yeah. One that a lot of people didn't expect.
An incumbent that wasn't expected to go down. That the other race of note, certainly on the Senate side, was Senator Chad McMahon. Had a strong run from Lawrence Smith, the challenger. He did end up winning fairly handily, 57% to 43%. Didn't really know what to expect in that one. She was ran a very active campaign. Of course, the senator, the incumbent, it's always a tough deal. And then the open seat in, what about this one, in DeSoto County that had Kimberly Remack. Has that one been called yet? I'm seeing that it's in Jimmy Goodkind is the challenger there. So 50% is what I'm seeing on her, but I don't see on that particular race.
I have not seen that one called at this point.
That's District 7, so I don't think that's been called yet, right? On the House side, Ms. Remack, I think, has served as the president of the Mississippi Federation of Republican Women. I think she's run for office before.
That one has not yet been called.
Not called, right?
98% reporting. She's at 50%, and then James Goodkind is at 45%.
Right. Where's the other 5?
A guy named...
so there's another candidate.
Gregorian Walker has 151 votes, 5%.
Okay, gotcha. So that one hadn't been called yet.
That one has not been called yet. Also, the Democratic ticket for Ag Commissioner has not yet been called, but it's looking like Robert Bradford will win that one. Most likely, he's at 52% right now. Bethany Hill's at 26%, and Terry Rogers is at 22%. And if it if it doesn't get called, obviously it'll go to a runoff, and runoffs will be held on August 29th. That's a Tuesday.
Right.
And so we'll see there. But it's looking, we've got about 94% reporting, precincts reporting in that race. So it's looking like Bradford will separate himself from the pack. But there are a few that have not been called yet. So it's interesting to see the ones that haven't been called yet. When you go vote on Tuesday, you're hoping that all the votes are counted by the time Wednesday morning rolls around, but sometimes that's just not the case.
Yeah, and Mr. Bradford, it was an interesting race because there was three really active candidates that campaigned, I think, quite heartily. And Mr. Bradford, of course, was on the program. All three of them were on the program when we were at Neshoba County Fair. He comes from an agricultural background. He brings that to the table, and I suspect that boosted his chances, and is why he's probably top of the ticket there.
Well, his campaign and his speech at Neshoba, too, was all about the agricultural industry. He really didn't get into, quote-unquote, political manners much, just talked about the farm and how to run an agricultural industry, how to run a farm and everything, and he definitely has a lot of experience in that realm. Now, he'll be facing a tough challenger in November, presuming he wins this election. He'll be facing a tough one in a very popular Andy Gibson, so we'll see how that goes. We also had some new sheriffs. I like the adage, there's a new sheriff in town. Well, in DeSoto County, Thomas Tuggle, who was a longtime lieutenant colonel of the Mississippi Highway Patrol, was also over the Law Enforcement Training Academy for a while. He's now the new sheriff of DeSoto County. Their outgoing sheriff had retired and endorsed Tuggle for that position. And so he's also the first black sheriff there since 1873.
Interesting.
So, historic election there in Hinds County. Marshawn Chrysler challenged Tyree Jones, but it didn't go well for Mr. Chrysler. Tyree Jones won by about 70 points.
Wow.
And
former city councilman, Mr. Chrysler.
Yes, sir. And he was, whenever I was living in Jackson as a kid, he was one of our city councilmen.
Yep.
And then in Harrison County, you had Matt. This was a pretty heated race. I mean, these two candidates were neck and neck the entire time. Matt Haley, a longtime law enforcement officer, has got about 25 years of experience in the field. He defeated Louis Elias in a very close race. And the two were very amicable with one another, too, in that race. Both have a lot of experience in law enforcement. So Haley will take over, be the new sheriff in town down there.
Yeah. Overall, just an interesting night. I just want to follow up on that Democratic Agriculture Commissioner race. All three of those candidates, of course, Mr. Rogers, very young man.
19.
Yeah, incredible. I mean, much respect to him
Absolutely.
to jump into that deal. All three, I thought, did well, articulated their message well. I just called attention to Mr. Bradford because I believe he's the only one that has personal experience as a farmer.
Rogers does too.
He does too. Okay.
He was raised on farm. He's just so young.
Okay, gotcha.
But Rogers was very energetic, very excited, glad to get his camp. He's like, you got to start somewhere, and if you want,
love to see it.
He said, if I'm going to swing big and try to get a statewide office, which was neat. And Bethany Hill talked a lot about food insecurity, she would use the agriculture industry to address. Yeah, and hemp. Yeah. But how she would address food insecurity through the agriculture industry. Kind of like, our current commissioner, Andy Gibson, did the same thing with his SAFE plan. Yep. But Bradford seemed to be the one of that field of candidates on the Democratic side who had the most experience on the farm in the agriculture industry itself.
All three impressed me.
Absolutely.
I'll just tell you that. Now, I think Commissioner Gibson is probably in the driver's seat to win that race in the general. I think he is very popular. His work has been respected and well received. So I suspect he will cruise to victory in that particular race. But it's just good to see new faces enter the realm and people that have a chance. And I think had a message that resonated with a lot of voters.
And you see that in a couple of the other other races as well. Like on the Attorney General side, Greta Kemp Martin had a very strong message, sent a strong message to the current incumbent, Lynn Fitch. And then, of course, both of those were unopposed yesterday. They'll face off against each other in November. Yep. Then on the Secretary of State side, Shawaski Young had a strong message, too. Talked a lot about online voter registration, fixing a lot of these problems at the polls, not having changes in precincts the night before an election. And so he's sending a strong message to the current incumbent, Michael Watson, as well. But again, you look at it, though, it is hard to unseat an incumbent, but it is good to see, fresh candidates on both sides of the aisle bringing fresh ideas.
Yeah, so before you go, any surprises in the governor's and lieutenant governor's race?
No, Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann took down Chris McDaniel yesterday. A lot of people expected that one to go into a runoff. It didn't. So Lieutenant Governor was rehired for the job, as he says on his campaign. And nothing surprising on the governor's trail. Now, Reeves will face a tough challenger in Brandon Presley, who's run a strong campaign accusing the governor of failing the state's hospital system and of corruption. And so we'll see how that one goes down. But on the lieutenant governor's side, though, the challengers, no one knows a lot about him. So I expect Delbert Hosemann to kind of
Appreciate it, Kevin.
See
Coming right back. Stay with us.